Hi, I am Boris Baňas. I'm the founder of CBDepot, and you're listening to Professionally Cannabis.
Where do they go, the smoke rings I blow each night? Oh, what do
Good morning, good evening, and good day. Welcome to the Professionally Cannabis Podcast. I'm Johnny Weiser, and of course, with me is the co-host with the most, is Oscar Houseman. Oscar, how are you getting along today?
The co-host with the mo-host. I'm doing very well. Enjoying the English summer, which today at least has decided to bring forth the sunshine. It's always good when you're never guaranteed the perfect outcome. The idea that it may or may not come really means that you value it. I wonder if our listeners feel the same about the show, or are we all hits?
And the industry in general.
Yes. I mean, I think we've seen a huge reckoning in the industry, but today's guest at least is one man who's not going to allow a temporary blip to stop him. He's been an activist since, I believe it was 98. I think we'd have to check the records for the precise date, but he's a well-known figure in European cannabis. So I think without further ado, let's cue up the clip.
Where do they go, the smoke rings
Welcome,
I
listeners.
blow each
Today's
night?
guest is Boris Baňas, with a long history in the hemp industry, having been an activist since 1998 and a serial co-founder, starting with hempseedoil.eu, a provider of hemp seed oil products, as you might imagine, and moving on to CBDepot, which has some recent announcements that are very interesting we'll get onto, and additionally as a board member of the European Industrial Hemp Association. Our guest today really is one of the most widely read and widely respected European hemp and CBD experts around. And Boris, we're very glad to have you on the show. Welcome.
Hello, everyone. I think from the beginning I have to correct some of your statements. I am no longer a board member of the European Industrial Hemp Association. I was elected in 2016, and then I voluntarily stepped down in fall last year because of purely personal reasons, and I still remain on AHA's advisory committee.
Boris, I have to ask you the question that we asked to all of our wonderful guests on the Professionally Cannabis Podcast, and that is, what led you to the plant?
Oh, high school experiments. I graduated from high school in 1993, and then I started my university studies at the School of Finance. My major is corporate finance. That's my academic background. But actually, it just evolved from cannabis to hemp in a very interesting way. It was actually fall of 1996, when I spent 6 months working under the table in Ann Arbor, Michigan, with my girlfriend, who is now my wife. And I came across a small booklet called Industrial Hemp: From Plastic to Paper to Cosmetics, which was written by John Rulek, founder of and former CEO of Nutiva. And I came back with this booklet. I still had 2 years to finish my major. And I was saying, okay, this is quite interesting. I mean, hemp, I never heard of it. I maybe heard of it, but, it was not in my focus at all. But I was sort of feeling a sense of potential business opportunity for the future. So we decided with my schoolmates, we would found, and we did found, a non-profit organization called Why Not Hemp. And we raised some money from Slovakian foundations. And I have asked for the translation rights of this small book from the original publisher. And actually we did it. We get some hemp paper from Austria. We got it printed in 4,000 copies, and we pretty much gave it away all. We never made any money on it. It was fully funded. So that was my first project, when I think the book got published in 1998 or 1999. And already in 1999, I was actually finishing my thesis my master's degree thesis, and I already had a first private hemp research field or plot in Slovakia, approved by the Ministry of Health under the narcotic regime. I spoke to one agricultural research institute in my region, and we agreed they would rent us the plots. They gave their staff to do some, like supervisory research, but I was the person behind all the narcotic agenda. I managed to get all the licenses issued. We imported hemp seed from Ukraine, Hungary, and also we had some Slovakian genetics from the gene bank in a agricultural research institute of the Slovak Republic. And we had our first research hemp field in 1999. Then I repeated that project in 2000, and then we did another one in 2003. But at that time, I was already working in the industry. It was pretty much electrical industry. We had lots of plastic injection equipment. We were building tools, doing plastic injection moldings. And even in that part of my life, I was playing with some tests with hemp reinforced plastics. There was a small company in France called AFT Plasturgie. They provided us with the resin, with the granules reinforced with hemp fiber. I think it was polypropylene. And we just, I did few tool trials with some moldings, so I could see that it's also one of the viable ways how to use hemp. Of course, our guys in the injection tool shop overheated the material, so it was like hemp smell everywhere. It was fun. It was fun.
You made the switch from hemp seed, food, fiber, material products to what could be more rightly termed pharmaceutical or pharmaceutical-like products in, I want to call it 2014. What was it like making that switch? What drove you? And I assume that's the majority of your business now at the moment. So how is it? How do you find it being in the CBD space much earlier than most of the current market was? What's your long-term perspective as probably one of the few people we've spoken to who's been in CBD for 6 years now?
Well, look, this was again, I think we were just the early adopters in Europe of the trends, which were already visible in the USA since 2013. And definitely in 2014, we were already receiving demands from the European companies like, give me that hemp oil. I mean, what hemp oil? That one that cures the cancer. I mean, come on, that's hemp extract. It's illegal. So we were at a certain point of business development with our hemp food products that we were already quite comfortable. We were doing well. And we started to really, I said like, wait a minute, we should do something about it, right? And I think we launched our first products infused with CBD at the CannaFest trade show in Prague in October 2014. At that time, we were buying the pure CBD from UK, would you believe? From BSPG company. Mm-hmm. And we launched our first e-liquids and cosmetic serums to the wholesale market. And as it happened in early 2015, we joined forces with advanced chemists from Prague who at that time were developing hemp extraction and CBD purification process at the laboratory scale at the Czech Academy of Sciences under the Institute of Chemical Processes Fundamentals. And that's when we met our current colleagues, Dr. Jan Storch and Dr. Jan Sikora. And we decided that we would join forces, so they would dedicate their efforts to the technological development, and our part would take on the commercialization of their scientific knowledge and technological knowledge. And as it happened, we started supplying first commercial volumes of isolated CBD in summer 2015. And Our first customer was a German pharmaceutical company, Bionorica, whose CBD business was recently taken over by the canopy growth. So having a pharma company as a first real customer was extremely steep learning curve for us in terms of compliance, in terms of specification, in terms of testing, in terms of process setup, audits, and everything. So that legacy is still with us, and we always wanted to be ahead of everybody in terms of regulatory approach. So of course, at that time, our capacity, would you believe, was like 2 kilograms of CBD per month. That's what we could deliver. And our first commercial contract for 10 kilograms took us 5.5 months to fulfill.
Must be different now.
Yeah. Yeah, So that's how it started, That's how it started. So we were very well established through 2016 and 17. We were still one of the few sources of CBD worldwide. Let's put it this way. I mean, at that time, I didn't have to sell. I was just receiving orders, Of course, that has changed considerably after the American manufacturers came into full power and full processing capabilities. So we had to be step ahead again. That's when we focused on the CBG extraction and isolation. We were doing experiments already in 2016, and we launched our CBG isolate commercially in January 2017.
As one of the, if not the first organization to have had a validated novel food application, which is necessary in the European Union now, would you be able to give our listeners a little flavor of the process that you guys have had to have gone through to get to the point where you are?
We weren't aware of novel food regulation, that it ever even existed, until summer 2015. That's when we started to formulate products for the food supplement sector, and we made a voluntary consultation with Czech authorities. And they told us that, if you want to use highly purified CBD, it has to be purified because it cannot contain THC, right? So if you want to use highly purified extract to the point where it already becomes cannabidiol, then you have to go through the novel food approval. And we said, what the hell is that? So we started to dig into that. We started to speak to the consultants, and it was evident that we simply have to do it. So we filed our first application for the isolated CBD in 2016. It was done not directly through CBDepot, but through one of our shareholders, a company called Cannabis Pharma. And at that point of time, there was still old novel food regulation, which was in force. So the submission was done through the Ministry of Agriculture of the Czech Republic. The dossier went through the initial assessment of the Czech Scientific Committee for the Food Safety with a positive outcome. And then it was passed on to the European Commission for the next level assessment. However, that process hasn't been finalized until December 31st, 2017, because since January 1st, 2018, the new novel food regulation came into force. So we had to resubmit this application I think it was done in April or May 2018. And then there was a very long silence, which lasted for several months. And then EFSA started to contact us about the additions to the dossier. We had to, provide much more information. Eventually, EFSA finished the preliminary assessment. It's called suitability check. Suitability check by EFSA was finalized on this dossier almost 1 year ago. Exactly July 10th, 2019 was when EFSA finalized the suitability check, which means their staff declared that the dossier is ready for the risk assessment, but still it needs to be validated by the European Commission. And up to this date, that validation didn't come through. So we decided to go for the plan B in September last year, since we already had our synthetic CBD, synthetically manufactured cannabidiol, like identical stuff from the plant-based cannabidiol. We had that product already on the market for 18 months, mainly for the needs of the cosmetic sector or for the jurisdictions where plant-based CBD is not allowed. So we compiled parallel dossier for the synthetic CBD, which took 3.5 months for the EFSA suitability and few next days for the validation by the European Commission. So that dossier is currently under the risk assessment by EFSA. And EFSA should come back to us sometime in December.
Now, having gone through this process, what have you learnt that you would do differently if you were to start all over again? You know, one of the common themes we're hearing in the industry is folks being a little unclear as to how they can successfully put through their applications. What words and nuggets of wisdom would you bring to the table for listeners of ours who are perhaps further behind the curve than you guys are?
Well, I think I would have spoken to expert consultants much sooner. Of course, you have to pay some money for the consulting, but that actually pays back in the time savings and a lot of headache.
And do you think that having had your application in, that it's going to end up in a scenario where you are the top level supplier for a lot of CBD products and brands in Europe? Because I know in the UK, at least from 2021 in March, I believe, all our CBD products are meant to have novel foods authorization. And if you're one of the only guys with an application in, are you getting a lot of incoming queries about how many people you can supply, how many brands you can drive, basically?
Well, look, the situation around the UK is quite new. It was quite confusing, but now the position of the UK authorities are becoming clearer and clearer. So we just have to resubmit the dossier, and we believe that since it's already validated on the European level, it will become valid by January 31st, 2021. So customers using our ingredient can keep formulating their products and can remain on the market. Strangely enough, UK FSA doesn't require authorization. When speaking about CBD, they only say that application has to be validated by March 31st next year. So the full risk assessment doesn't have to be finalized by the end of the first quarter next year.
As we discussed before we started recording this episode, you've recently been granted your GMP certificate, Good Manufacturing Practices, which allows you to produce products for the EU pharmaceutical market. And I'd like to get a sense of where are you going with that? What's the strategy behind getting heavy into pharma?
The Czech National Competent Authority, like Czech FDA, let's put it this way, Czech State Institute for Drug Control, issued a new GMP compliance manufacturing certificate for CBD to our site in Brno in the Czech Republic, which is operated by a sister company, the CB21 Pharma. CB21 Pharma is founded and managed by Dr. Jan Storch, who is also one of the founders of CBDepot and is our production director. I have to say this was sort of a renewed certificate because we used to have a small contract manufacturer in Prague since late 2017, small pharmaceutical production, but we decided to split ways in October last year. And Jan Storch and his team, they took on a preparation of a new premises in the industrial park. It was all already prepared, like pharma grade rooms, clean rooms, air conditioning and everything. And then we just relocated the manufacturing equipment from a former manufacturer, did some upgrades in terms of volumes to a new equipment, which was installed in December. And since then we were under the auditing process of the Czech regulator. Unfortunately, the process was delayed for almost 3 months because the auditors could not come for inspections during the country lockdown. But we are finally resuming the manufacture and supply of the pure cannabidiol manufactured as an active substance for pharmaceutical use. So we are not making any finished products. We supply pure CBD to distributors of active substances or to companies that want to experiment with it, that make clinical trials and drug development.
Well, I think I'll sort of go back on my question again, because I think we've got a sense of what's going on, but I wanted to go more into the strategy of it. And to give some context here, I think on the last earnings call by Canopy, they've said that they're pivoting away from the pharmaceutical product development side of the cannabis market. So that's an indicator from the biggest by market cap company that pharmaceutical cannabinoids are not so in vogue, let's say. So as someone who is going in the opposite direction, I'd love to understand the counter thesis.
Well, look, it depends on probably the regional modus operandi, because I don't believe that pharmacy compounding is very common in the North American market, but it is very common in Europe. And even though cannabidiol is now only authorized in one medicinal product with marketing authorization, which is Epidiolex, manufactured in the UK. That's the only product using pure CBD, which is available to patients under prescription. However, it doesn't prevent state authorities in few markets in Europe to allow co-treatment with pharmacy compounded preparations. So my customers, our customers, distributors, supply the pharmacies, and they compound on individual basis a preparation for a patient under prescription from the doctor. So in few countries in Europe, this is a common practice. Then again, it's about whether the government or the health insurance system reimburses the treatment or not. For example, in Germany, they only reimburse treatment with compounded THC, but they don't reimburse the treatment with compounded CBD. So despite the size of the market, such as Germany, the demand for pure CBD is very small. We supply much more CBD to much smaller countries in Europe compared to Germany, for instance. And again, drug development means going through all the stages of the clinical trials, as with any other registered drug. So probably for large Canadian LPs, this is probably not enticing. It's probably not enough incentive, while they can still sell medicinal cannabis, which can be dispensed to patients without any clinical trial.
And what differences have you and the team found in dealing more frequently with pharmaceutical-based customers versus that from the health and wellness space?
Well, it's a completely different approach. You have to be ready to welcome auditors. You have to show them everything. All the SOPs you have are on the table and they can go through them. All the process validation, paperwork, it has to be completely transparent. You cannot hide anything. So customers are always welcome. They actually have to come and do an audit before they can start purchasing from you. So they have to qualify you as a supplier. So it's a common process in the pharmaceutical industry. As I said, we already had a sneak peek into that world in 2015. So we knew what was coming, and that's why we call ourselves upmarket cannabinoid solutions, because this is how we have learned to behave, and this is how we are behaving. And we want to play the real game with the real big players.
And do you see any environment where the health and wellness side of the CBD and other cannabinoid bulk customers that you have coming to you, do you see an environment where, as the market matures and continues to develop in years to come, that more of these brands will be looking for the same level and quality of bulk cannabinoids as the pharmaceutical industry demands?
Well, I hope so. That the market will become more and more professional and will be operated by the true food business operators, because you can definitely see that many so-called CBD companies, they are not even, registered with their food regulators in their country. So I'm really hoping that the market will become more professional than it's now. And it's already evident. We already see that suddenly I receive an inquiry from a company I never heard of. They are very well positioned in the food ingredient space, in the food ingredient supply space. And we don't start the discussions about prices. We start discussions about quality questionnaires. That's the right approach. And only after I pass evaluation stage of the quality management team, I start discussing with the business development team. That's the normal course of events.
We've probably got time for one last question here. So I'd like to maybe take it a little less technical and specific and maybe a bit more hopeful. Sort of, where do you want the cannabis industry to go? As someone who's seen such a transition since, I assume, in the 90s when you were an activist for hemp, people looked at you as a lunatic. Now you must feel a bit like a prophet, having seen all these wonderful medical advances go alongside with the rehabilitation of this plant that you've been talking about for years. Where do you want to go next? What would you like the cannabis industry world and hemp world to look like in, I don't know, 2025, 2030, whatever time frame you think would make a real difference?
Well, look, I think in where I would like it to be, it will take generations, or at least one generation, because the current state of event and the way how we got here, it took some people a century or even more than a century to get us where we are in terms of restrictions. I strongly support the scientific work done by the WHO, where it was clarified that it's not absolutely dangerous substance and it should be removed from the cannabis, and the resin should be removed from the Schedule 4. So it definitely has already an appreciated medicinal value. And in terms of my very liberal standpoints, I personally believe cannabis should be legal for the regulated adult use.
I think a lot of our listeners would agree with you there.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's a very nice place for us to wrap. Boris, it has been a real pleasure having you on Professionally Cannabis. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much for your time. And thank you all the listeners as well.
Where do they go? The smoke rings I blow each night.
Well, listeners, we hope you enjoyed that. And much thanks to Boris for joining us on Professionally Cannabis. As ever, if you enjoyed today's episode, please like and subscribe, or using whatever podcast media you use, do the thing that suggests that the podcast was a good use of time and propel us through the charts. But until next time, that's it. Take care, listeners, and goodbye.
Hello, please take me above, take me with you.